So for me, it's interesting because I don't think I realized how involved I was in radio at a young age. Like it was
Mhm.
never something that I consciously did, but I listened. I mean, I was a Hot 97 kid growing up.
Mhm.
It was the only station that was playing hip hop. I loved hip hop growing up. So I was like a religious Hot 97 listener.
Mhm.
When I got older and started commuting to college, I started listening to Z100. But I remember growing up, even though the station I ended up working on, I love that station now. They used to never play hip hop. Like that was kind of their thing. So for me, I was just a Hot 97 person. I would listen all the time. My little alarm clock radio had Hot 97 on it. And then I didn't think I was going to end up in entertainment at all, but I switched majors in college and ended up in the TV and radio broadcasting department at Seton Hall. And the reason I did that was more for the TV stuff. But I took a couple radio classes, and Bartell, who's at KTU, was one of actually I had him for 3 different classes. And he invited a bunch of the students. He was like, hey, I work on the weekends. If you ever want to come see a radio studio, let me know. And I was one of like 3 students that decided to go do it, got a part-time job working events and stuff, and just fell in love with it. And for me growing up, I always liked throwing events. I loved getting people together. I didn't like necessarily if the attention was on me, which
Okay.
is a weird place to be now, hosting a bunch of things, but I did love putting people together and making sure that people had a good time. So like whether it was my church youth group growing up, whether it was college parties or high school parties, I just liked bringing people together for a really good time. And I got to do that with promotions. And I'll never forget the first time when I became promotions coordinator, we did KTU's Beat Stock, which was like a huge show in the New York, New Jersey area. And it was the final act. And I remember I looked out from behind the stage and saw like 20,000 people losing their minds. And I just remember thinking, man, this is so cool that I got to put this together. And all those people, even though they don't know who I am, and it doesn't matter, are all having fun because of like the hard work that me and my team put together. And that's kind of how I fell in love with radio. It was never even the on-air side of it that drew me to the industry. When you work in promotions, when you get started, everyone's kind of your age. You're all a bunch of idiots kind of going out, getting drunk after events and stuff like that. So you end up developing these really great friendships. And I think they're stronger friendships than you would start on the programming side, I believe, because the programming side is a little more cutthroat and it's
Yeah.
older. Everyone usually cuts their teeth either in an internship or in promotions. Once you get like a full-fledged on-air job, you're usually past that part of your crazy life. Our first couple events, or mine at least, I would say, were all like disasters to start. I had one good first event, which is that it was like some college spirit day. And then the next event I went to, we were supposed to be doing a grand opening of like a sports authority.
Mhm.
And I want to say it was Queens. And if you've ever been around New York, I don't know if other cities do this, but if a building is built without a union, the union will show up to like their grand opening with this like 20-foot inflatable rat, and they'll protest outside of the establishment.
Really?
And that, I want to say this was like my second or third event. We drove out to Queens, and all of a sudden we roll up, and there's all these people from like the construction workers union protesting outside of Sports Authority. And they're booing us the whole time, like we had something to do with it. They have their big ass inflatable rat. Every time we got on the mic, they would chant "Shame on you, KTU." Again, as if we were the ones that like built all of this and knew about it. And then halfway through, the manager of the Sports Authority was like, listen, guys, it's a little testy out here. Why don't you come inside and just like, you'll play the music kind of low, do your giveaways inside. So we said, okay. We got back out to the van with a flat tire and garbage filled up in the truck. Like the union vandalized our van while we were gone.
What?
And I just remember thinking, because again, this was like my second or third event. I was like, man, this job sucks.
Right.
I'll never forget, after they were chanting "Shame on you, KTU" for like 20 minutes, one of the guys actually came up and tried to request a song.
Really?
And I looked at him and I was like, are you kidding me? You've been cursing me out for 20 minutes. I'm not playing your, and he wanted some classic rock song, and we were a dance station at the time, so it wouldn't have played anyway, but it was just the wildest experience.
It's like the listeners that harass you the whole time, but then they're like, can I get a free shirt?
Yeah,
Even though, like,
exactly.
your station sucks, I don't listen to radio. Or
Yeah.
do you feel like some of your promotions experience and kind of, because it seems like, yeah, you're into like the human connection side too, that's helped been successful in growing like your audience now, or I guess in general, just your audience growing throughout radio and now?
Being in promotions helped prepare me for being on the air. And a lot of it is because when you're in promotions, you're going to all places, even if it's your home market, right? Like I grew up in New York, New Jersey, but I didn't travel out to Queens often. I didn't travel out to Staten Island or Brooklyn or any of the other boroughs or the places in New Jersey that would have to go do events. So you get to see a part of life that you probably wouldn't have interacted with otherwise. And you talk to so many different people, especially now the way that companies are set up. When I first started at KTU, that was the only station we worked for. And by the end of my time in promotions, we were kind of working for all of the cluster stations.
Yep.
So then I'd be doing, events for Power 105.1, Q104.3, Z100, and you're seeing all these different groups of people, different age groups, different demographics, and you learn how to talk to everybody on a one-to-one level in person. And that definitely translates to bringing people on the phone lines or talking to people on the text line and understanding everyone's got their own story. And even though you might not agree on something or you might be from different worlds, you can still interact in a positive way.
Yeah.
Anytime you do promotions, it never leaves you. And if you can do a summer of promotions at a radio station, you can do basically anything in the world.
Oh my God. It's
because it prepares you for everything.
Especially like business wise. Like I always think like, you think of like how many grand openings that you go to and how many, and sometimes you're right there on location and you're like, well, this is a stupid spot that they opened this store. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Now, since you can kind of control more of your own promotions and marketing, does that become more enjoyable for you? I know it's probably more work now that you don't have like a team. Yeah. But do you like that you can kind of just do whatever you want?
Yeah, I think so. There's positives and negatives to everything. Mm-hmm. I would definitely suggest, especially if you're in the situation that Carla Marie and I were in, where you got let go and you wanted to find a place to fill that void and still connect with your audience. Twitch is a great place for it, but you've also got to be prepared to learn and work. Like we kind of went back to school again, and thankfully we were already working on Twitch beforehand. Yeah. So we had some of the concepts down, but we've learned so much in the year and a half since we've been let go, which seems like it was yesterday, but it's been a year and a half.
Isn't that crazy?
And there's still work that, if you saw the setup we have right now, there are wires and lights and cameras and levelers and all these different things plugged in. And that's my promo days, right? Like setting all the event stuff up before we went live and making sure that it all works perfectly before you even turn on a microphone. So it all kind of is intertwined. Yeah. It's definitely a learning experience and it's definitely work and you've got to be ready for it, but it's also a lot of fun.
You don't have somebody above you like, well, I don't know if drag queen bingo is a good idea.
Exactly. And that was one of the most frustrating things. I remember we wanted to do for years because Seattle, and you're from the area, you know how influential the military community is around here. Mm-hmm. Between JBLM, between Bremerton, we've got Army, Air Force, and Navy all in the area. And then Boeing, which has a bunch of military contracts, is also here. So we wanted for so long, I think every year we asked like, hey, we want to do some sort of military appreciation show, whether we go to a base, maybe we bring an artist on stage with us or something. And the thing we kept getting back was, well, people in the military don't have meters, so they don't matter for our ratings. So we're not going to do it. And now we don't have to worry about that. Like if we decided to do that, we can go do it whenever we want. That we don't have to get approval from someone just to do a broadcast somewhere. A lot of people will say radio is dead. I don't necessarily believe that. Mm-hmm. But radio is struggling to hold on to a lot of the marketing budgets that they used to get from some of their bigger clients. And I don't know if radio has the privilege of being long-sighted instead of nearsighted.
That's
I don't know if radio actually has the ability to do that right now because so many managers and so many sales managers specifically are scrambling just to get a couple extra dollars in to keep the lights on.
They're doing that on the back end. Yet we have this cash to just give away to essentially pay listener. You know what I mean? It's the double your paycheck, listen all day. And I feel like that's just such lazy like marketing because it's really all you're doing. You're paying for people to listen.
And I think when they first started it and when they used to do it maybe once a year.
Yeah. And make it a special thing.
Yeah. It sounded special. But now, I haven't listened to a lot of the stations around here in a while, but anytime I tune into a radio station, there's a station from a big company giving away $1,000 an hour. It's like, well, now it doesn't matter because now it's become just like hearing a song. Yep. Right. It's just like hearing a recurring song. You're just like, oh, well, I can get this next hour. I don't need to listen right now. Leave it up to radio to make winning $1,000 be uncool. Like that's such a crazy concept when you think about it. Right. Because generally speaking, I don't care if you're super rich, $1,000 is a decent amount of money and radio has somehow made it meaningless.
Yeah. They took the sexy out of it.
Yeah. Like that's the only industry I've ever heard of that made winning $1,000 uncool and lame.
Yeah, that is such a great point.
And authenticity can't be faked. it's one of those things where when and you've probably been in meetings where you've heard managers talk to their on-air staff, like, oh, be authentic on the radio, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times radio doesn't take its own advice.
No.
Because a lot of it is so inauthentic. A lot of it is so forced and pre-recorded and scripted that they keep selling this narrative that it's authentic and it's real and it's live and it's local, but that's not the actual product that they're giving. And your customer experience, regardless of the industry you're in, is based on two things. It's what you tell the customer they're going to get and whether or not you followed through. And if those things don't match up, you're going to have a bad experience. Even if you told your customers, hey, you're going to come into this restaurant and get a $1 sandwich. It's not even going to be good, but it's only going to be $1. At least when they show up and eat a shitty sandwich, they go, oh, that's exactly what they told me was going to happen.
Exactly.
You know, like, so it's really just the expectation and the execution. If they don't match up, you're kind of screwed. When we started Twitch in 2018, that's when we got onto it. We were and for people who aren't familiar, Twitch is a live streaming platform. You can basically do a podcast with video live, and there's a live chat that goes along with it. It can be more involved, but that's like the base level. Mm-hmm. When we were moved to nights temporarily in Seattle, what we realized was happening, because we're a show that's really based off of live phone calls. That's the way we kind of learned under Elvis. So it's what we brought out to Seattle. After 7 o'clock, the phones just died. Yeah. I mean, even when we were giving away money at like 8:30 at night, the phones would be dead. That's how bad it was. So we decided, okay, well, if people aren't going to be in their cars and the app listening isn't probably where we want it to be, what's another thing we can do to get people involved? So we went on Twitch and we just tried it out. It was kind of this like auxiliary thing that we had on the side. But then when we launched our new show in the morning, we kind of turned it off for a little bit. And then when the pandemic hit, because everyone was remote and we were already on video, we decided to go just turn on Twitch again, since we already had that feed ready to go. And I think what happened was, because so many people were isolated by themselves, that chat is what connected a lot of people. And it was the first time you were able to meet a stranger, as creepy as that sounds, but meet a stranger, meet a new person, and have a discussion with them during the height of the pandemic. Yeah. And that's what really helped. So when we got kicked out of radio, and started going on Twitch again, there was usually like a 5 to 10 minute, like starting soon screen. And people were saying good morning to one another on that screen and in the chat. And that was the coolest thing to see. A lot of that stuff when we first did it was almost like survival instinct. Yeah. Like we were so mentally effed when we got let go that we just did what we knew how to do. And that was do a show and go meet people. We didn't really plan. I mean, we didn't have hotels until we were driving from one city to the next city. Like I was driving and Carla Marie was booking the hotels in the city that we were driving to. And then finding out from listeners, like what would be a good open space to meet people at. Yeah. Because a lot of the like we had never been to Omaha before. We had never been to Salt Lake City before. We had never been to a lot of the places that we went to. So we just relied on listeners to say, hey, this is a good public space where a lot of like the main neighborhoods kind of surround this public park and we can all go out there. One of the things that Carla Marie and I early on appreciated about one another was our willingness to take a chance. I mean, there's stuff that we're working on now for 2022 that like I'm learning new technology to be able to integrate it into what we're doing. And it might be great and it might be terrible, but both of us are like, well, let's try it out. And if it opens us up to a new place and a new space and a new audience, then why not? Or if it just gives our audience an additional way to consume what we're putting out there, then why not give it a try? And I think both of us have appreciated that about one another, is when she has an idea, I'll jump in. When I have an idea, she jumps in, and we really support each other and don't mind learning new things. At some point, there's a very good chance you're going to get fired. Right? Like that's the joke in radio, is like, you're not a radio person until you get fired. Yeah. But I feel like in a lot of studios, especially ones that aren't performing well, in a lot of markets, I should say, people kind of walk around on eggshells, but they don't do anything to future-proof their careers either. And you can't just bury your head in the sand and imagine that everything's going to work out perfectly without actually putting effort into it. And even, I mean, in radio, there's still super creative people. I know Strawberry and Lizette here in Seattle are doing really cool things with visuals, with video, they just started doing their podcast on Twitch as well. Mm-hmm. I know I see a lot of stuff come through intern John and his whole crew in DC. And I do want to shout out the Joe Show in Tampa because they're one of the few radio studios that I've ever seen that actually look cool in terms of like the lighting and the way that the video is done. There's like, color LED lights in the back and things like that. And it looks almost like a Twitch stream for what they produce and put on social. And they're at least doing things where it's pushing it to the future a little bit. How many radio studios do you walk into where there's like a stack of CDs in the corner that no one's used for 20 years? There's a stack of papers that are just scrap paper and they look terrible. Like, I think what Twitch is going to force people to do is say, let me look at this space and be proud of the place that I'm walking into. Because just like a first date, you could be the funniest, most personable person. But if you walk in there looking like a homeless person, that's that first impression. They're going to think, oh, this is a homeless person.
Little touches like the LED lights, which are so obviously popular now. I mean, you just look at TikTok and everywhere. It's like, they don't cost that much. So it's like the radio station could take one of those paychecks that they're not.
This was $30
yes.
behind me.
And it just adds such a nice, and I know yours move and they change colors and that's all like a station has to do. And they look a little nicer and just put a fucking ring. Like every station at this point should have a ring light in the studio somewhere.
Yep. Again, $30. Take some pride in what you're putting out there.
Yes.
And I think when you have an industry like ours, and I still consider radio my industry, even though I'm not in it right now. You have so many people that have been doing it for so long that are allergic to change. Yeah. And they've told themselves for years, this is just how I do it. This is how I get in my space. It's like, no, just be proud of the space you're in. And the great thing about lights like this is you can actually change them to your mood, right? Like we've had birthday shows where like the lights will go with music and things, and you can create a space where not only you and your audience, but your audience can feel the energy instead of just this lame ass standard radio studio. Yeah. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, you could completely redo your studio for like $100. You can't take your brand. Let's say you're a radio station and you're in even a top 100 market and you're a CHR station. You can't take photos and videos in your studio that look like they were built in 1970 and have never been updated and expect a younger audience to take you seriously at all. And then the other part is, now that everyone has done video conferencing and everyone's doing videos in their homes, why is, a mom who's doing marketing as her 9-to-5 job, why does her video look better than a multi-million-dollar radio studio? Why does her Zoom call look better than the Instagram videos that you're putting up?
Yes.
And people are going to have to start answering for those things. I mean, I'll pull information from the Twitch seminar that we were a part of yesterday.
Yeah.
One of the first things that the Twitch employees and the people who were speaking on the seminar kept saying was almost every single speaker started with, make sure you know why you're streaming. Make sure you know why you give a damn, because if you don't give a damn, then no one's going to care. And I think that same thing has to be said to people who are doing radio shows and to podcasts is, are you just going in there because your paycheck requires you to show up or turn on your Zoom camera and join your fellow co-hosts? Or are you doing it because you actually like what you're doing and you have a message and you have something fun you want to talk about and something engaging you want to do? And, at some point, I think there are a lot of people who are doing it because that's what their paycheck requires them to do.
I totally agree.
It's interesting because there were so many times where we were setting up cameras and I would be in the studio late testing things out with our engineer. And I have to shout out our engineer, Jeff, because he was like one of the most important people in my life at that radio station, because every crazy idea I had, and I pray that every single radio person has a Jeff in their corner, because I would come up with the wildest problems to solve. And within 2 days, he was like, I figured it out. Here's what we're going to do. But other than him, there were so many people in the management who every time I had a request or something, a problem that I was trying to fix proactively, the response was always, do we really need to do that right now? And my answer was always, yeah, we do.
Right.
Because this is how we're going to connect with people. And this is what's going to set us apart. And much like you were saying before, it's hard to keep track of everybody. And that's why a certain handful of people kind of rise to the top in terms of gathering your attention. That's the real world, right? You can get your entertainment from anywhere. But if you're not putting together a good product, you're just going to get lost. And the products that are the most entertaining, most visually appealing, and best put together are the ones that are going to rise to the top. Just being entertaining, unfortunately, isn't good enough. It's a weird place to be in the entertainment world, where that's the starting line. Being entertaining means you're in the industry.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? And Shawn's he's at Odyssey, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Odyssey should be making him the VP of like video streaming yesterday. They should have done that.
Somebody said that earlier on a call earlier this week. Same exact thing you just said.
And he should have been creating what he does in Vegas for the whole company. Because he does it probably visually better than anyone else that I've seen. And even with the NK morning show, the interesting thing that I found, because we were in a similar place before we got let go, where we were on Twitch while we were doing our show. We only did it for probably an hour and a half, because then we would play literally 20 minutes of commercials, and I couldn't look people in the face or in the camera and be like, hey, we're just hang out for these 20 minutes of commercials. But what we found, especially during the pandemic, when we were all in different places, was being on Twitch actually made us sharper, because instead of just turning off the microphone, waiting 7 minutes until we were going to talk again, we were engaging not only with one another, but we were on camera. So even if we were just sitting there, we were like ready.
Yeah.
And we were engaging with our audience who was on Twitch. So I would suggest to literally, especially if you're a morning show, be on Twitch. Because it is going to make you better. Things are going to come up in that downtime with your audience that you're going to be able to turn into topics, and it's going to make you sharper, because you're not going to sit back and basically like mail it in until your next break. You're going to be active. You have to show that you care at some point. You have to show that you care in more ways than just saying, hey, listen to me when I talk for 35 seconds on the radio. Like I said before, I don't know if most of these companies have the money to invest in anything other than keeping the lights on and paying the executives. Like that's really, you're paying your top line people and you're keeping the lights on. That's how the budget works in a lot of these places. But yeah, I think you've been hitting the nail on the head with all of these discussions that you've done, all the things that you've posted, where it's like, if you don't care about your product and your audience, why should anyone care about you? And this morning, right before our show, we got a message from a woman named Wendy, who has been following us ever since our Elvis days. And she sent us a message. She took time out of her day to take a picture on an Instagram account that I don't think she ever uses, and send us a picture to both Carla Marie and I. She was wearing her pink "You Look Great" hoodie on her way to lung surgery. Like she was going to be out. They were going to cut open her chest and do surgery on her lungs. And she thought of not only wearing our "You Look Great" shirt as like a positive message, but also like including us in probably one of the biggest, scariest days of her life.
Wow. That gives me goosebumps.
And had we had time this morning, we were going to post the picture on the show and do a bunch of stuff. But if you can't develop a relationship like that, and that's an extreme, right? I mean, we don't want all of our audience to go get lung surgery by any means. But if you can't have that two-way relationship with your audience, you can't expect them to show up and subscribe and listen and tune in when you tell them to tune in, or support the clients and partners that you tell them to support, because you're not putting in the effort to care about them or even remotely show that you care. And if you can't do that, why should they care about you? It's just like any relationship.
Exactly.
There were two questions or two things to ask, really. Are you doing a look at me type of show or a look at us type of show? And the look at me type of shows, they're getting fewer and farther between. And really, like, radio is not even the space for that anymore. Like, if you want to be a Jake Paul and do a whole look at me type of thing, go on YouTube and do some entertaining, edgy, weird shit. But doing a look at me show and being like, hey, I'm so funny, and then we have a second date update on the way, like, no one cares anymore.
Right. Yeah. And then 20 minutes of commercials.
Yeah. You're doing the same thing that everyone else is doing, but your inflated ego makes you think that you're doing it better when you have the same scripts, the same call services, like it's not special. It's funny. Like there were definitely times where I would get probably more annoyed than I should have in a radio studio. And one of the things that would drive me insane was when there were people in the studio and phones were ringing and not being answered.
Oh yes.
That was my biggest pet peeve, because I just sat there going, that's someone that took time out of their day. And we're not doing a contest. It's someone that's just calling. How are we not trying to answer? And sometimes it's impossible because if you have a great topic or something and you've only got 3 people in a studio, usually, and you're lucky today if you have 3 people in the studio, so you can't get to every call, but at least make the attempt.
Yeah.
You know? And I think one of the reasons you talked about this before, like we have this really great audience on Twitch that's followed us since we got let go. But the crazy thing is, and I don't know whose secrets are who, but you've got to remember that we used to do, when we did Dirty Little Secret, they were legit people. And that's our community. Like people appreciated the fact that we put them on the air. We protected their identity. We changed their voice. We gave them an outlet for things. And that's part of our community. Like, because we treated people like people.
And people like that real advice. You know what? Why do you think like Reddit forums are so big, or just why forums in general have just been big for so long?
We had a manager who hated the fact that we had so many callers on. And his argument was, well, you can't control what the caller is going to say. So you can't make sure it's A+ content every time you put it on, which is 100% true. I mean, some callers suck, right? But at the same time, I didn't get into this to control every single aspect and script everything. Part of it is like, I don't want to do that work. I'm not trying to script a whole thing for someone else and make them sound awesome and put it, that's a lot of work. I'm not doing that. There are so many things that we did on the radio and on Twitch that we never would have thought to script because it was real life. It was things that were so foreign to what my brain can process, especially with Dirty Little Secret.
Yeah.
That it wouldn't, our Dirty Little Secrets would not have been good if we were doing that. And I remember I've talked about this on Twitch. There were exactly 3 Dirty Little Secrets that we had to script. And it was because this manager was on us for months and we were about to go on a vacation. I was like, you know what, let's just script them. We'll use the service and we'll play them on vacation. It'll make our lives a little easier. So we did. And they were okay. But everything that we got from real callers was so much better. And yes, some of it was crazy cheating stuff. But some of it was also like you felt good for the person because they were getting something off of their chest. As weird as what they were saying was to the general population, everyone that listened was like, wow, that person is so much freer now because they had that 3 minutes with the Carla Marie Anthony Show. And that was the craziest thing that would happen is when we would have, especially some of those like fetishized, I don't know, fetish Dirty Little Secrets.
Yeah.
When we would have one that aired, we'd get like 7 text messages about people who either wanted to share a very similar thing, or they're just saying, oh my God, I do that too. I thought I was the only person.
Wow.
Or I'm into that too. I thought I was the only person, you know?
That's amazing.
Or give me that person's number because I want to hook up with them or whatever it was. Like, it was cool seeing that. And that's, as weird as it sounds, like that built our community because people also trusted us.
And because you've been kind of doing your own thing now this past year, do you feel that going into any job negotiations now that you're in a totally different place?
Absolutely. Once you're fired, you're not scared of being fired anymore. That doesn't mean it's good. That doesn't mean every job I get, I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get fired. But you understand that you're going to make it. Like if you work towards it, if you put your head in the right direction and just go forward, you're going to be okay. But we've had a couple of conversations with radio programmers around the country, and I'll never forget, there was one person who was basically like, well, you know, what kind of compensation are you guys looking for? And the answer I gave that manager was, well, it depends. If you are looking to hire the Carla Marie Anthony Show that was on the mornings in Seattle and get that same content, you're going to pay for the Carla Marie Anthony Show. But if we're doing something where we are afforded more freedoms outside of the radio station, and we can do the things that we like to do outside of radio without any interruption, without any roadblocks, then there's a scale. And I remember I never would have said that 4 years before. I would have been like, oh my God, whatever you want, just pay me. I'm so excited to work. But
yes.
I think once we collectively take back a little bit of the power, because oftentimes we neuter ourselves, right? If there's someone who's going to take the job for $30,000 less, that hurts everybody.
Yep.
Because then the companies know that they can get away with paying everyone way less than they deserve outside of like the top 10 people in every company. So I think we're definitely both at a better place now in terms of negotiations and just having discussions. Like every time we talk to a radio programmer, and we've talked to a bunch of really great people, and we're very honest. Like we know that you don't need us, and we also know that we don't need you. But if something works, then that's awesome.
Yep.
just like I've said about a bunch of other things, it's like any relationship. You want it to be an equal relationship, not where one side is desperate for the other or one side is trying to take advantage of the other. And we've taken that attitude into every different discussion or interview that we've been a part of. It's scary and encouraging when you finally figure out that thing and you finally figure out that you don't need to rely on the people that you relied on before. There's like this crazy freedom that comes with it.
Yes.
And it's not easy. I don't want everyone to think like, oh, I can't wait to get fired and fire up Twitch, because it's not easy.
Yeah.
And like we've alluded to before, there's a lot of stuff you got to learn and there's a lot of real work and you've got to be committed to it. I can't tell you how many people got let go from radio after we did that hit us up about podcasting advice or Twitch advice. And maybe did one podcast or 2 streams and then you never saw from them again. Like it takes consistency, it takes dedication, it takes hard work, it takes education. But once you do all that, and if you're willing, there's like this crazy freedom that comes with it. No, and I think you look at the biggest content creators in the world, right? Like the Netflixes, the big YouTube creators of the world, they're all putting their content out there to make it as easily digestible for their audience. Mm-hmm. Whereas radio is still very much oh no, you need to listen at 8:50 on Tuesday morning if you want to hear this. Otherwise, you've got to wait for the podcast version of it that's going to come out 4 hours later and won't even be a great podcast product. So I think radio just has to get better at understanding, like, you got to be bigger than radio. Yeah. And to anyone who's watching this and is like, oh, I want to start some things, start it outside of the radio station first. Mm-hmm. Own it yourself, start it outside of your radio station, learn it, develop it, and then bring it to your radio station, because otherwise the company is going to own it and they're going to drive it directly into the ground. How many radio stations do you follow on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook that have 30,000 followers and 1 like?
So many.
One like, and not that we have to live and die by likes, but there's clearly something you're doing and it's not the right thing.
Yeah.
It's clearly the wrong thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Because that math just doesn't work out. It's embarrassing, not almost embarrassing. It is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I don't understand how they even sell clients to that. Like I've seen, there was, for Halloween, I forgot what the client was, but I saw it on like everybody's pages, and they'd be posting like the little graphic on Instagram. Mm-hmm. And these accounts that had 20 to 40,000 followers were getting 2 likes. And yes, it's a graphic and I get it. Like those things aren't going to do well in general, but aren't you embarrassed to show that to your client down the road?
Right. Or
you've got to do better.
So going forward now, is it just then now really developing the Carla Marie and Anthony show, but we're open to opportunities, but now we're not seeking out a radio station to put us, we're just building our brand. Is that?
If there is a perfect situation back in radio, we would most likely go back. Mm-hmm. We are not desperate for a radio job by any means. And if there's a programmer watching this, that doesn't mean we don't want to do it. It just means it's going to be a mutually beneficial partnership. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't going to be kind of what our situation was before. Words of advice: be angry, be sad, be disappointed, feel all of those emotions, because it sucks when you're let go. Even if you don't want to be there anymore, that feeling, just like if you're in a relationship and you know you're at the end of a relationship and you break up, like you're allowed to be hurt, you're allowed to be sad. But look towards the future and understand you can do whatever you want. And if there's ever a way that either myself or Carla Marie can help, whether you want to, like, I don't know, find some free resources on how to get on Twitch or whatever, we would both love to help. You can always reach out to me at Worst Anthony. Carla Marie is the Carla Marie on every platform. Like, I don't want people to think that when you get let go, everything is going to fall into place perfectly right away. Mm-hmm. It is okay. Every single person that I spoke to, especially this past November, I guess November of 2020, when iHeart let go, like everybody, said, listen, I know a million people are going to tell you it's going to be okay. And I promise you it will be, but lean into every emotion because they're all valid. You're allowed to be upset, sad, depressed, whatever. And at some point you'll get through it on your own time, and everyone's timeline is going to be different. It's going to be okay. That's it, really. Feel all the feelings and know that it's going to be okay.